Hi, friends. Welcome to the third movement in our conversation around the development of the leaders that are in your world. We've been talking about how does God develop a leader from above. We've talked about how are we developed from within, and I've selected a menu of texts which I hope have whetted your appetite to become curious about those two prepositions. But now we take the social step. I consider this the audacious step of leadership development. You see, now we're tested. And my first question is to whether leaders are born or made. And if you selected born, well, there's nothing else for you to do. But if you're on the made side of things, you're obligated. So we're screwed either way we go in terms of how are we going to participate in the development of others when clearly there are gaps in the pipeline, there's frustration in the workplace, the congregational space is often in chaos, moving towards deformation, or holding steady and holding steady. Whether health and generativity are the criteria that are used to determine if it is on track becomes a whole different question altogether. Some will simply take their pay and go home. So, we now make the audacious step, the social step, to believe that we can participate in the development of others is a choice that we have to make in this step. I propose that leaders are made, and if made, then they're not made through happenstance, but they're made in cooperation with God and all of the socializing forces around us, but best if they proceed with intelligence, with comparative learning of others who've thought seriously, who've amassed wisdom and insight, and know some of the dead-end roads. So I've invited the mentoring conversation. That as a portion of what we do in our class and our conversation is that you both find a mentor and become a mentor. And for my part, I'd like to interest you in this as a lifestyle issue, as a value, as a way to be in the world. We'll talk more about that later. But to find one and become one becomes a challenge. Well, it's awkward for a lot of folks, and the anxiety around this assignment, as I've used this kind of thing over the years, it's hard to believe, but except that some of you may be experiencing it. Well, my intention is not to give a lot of instruction around this assignment so that your learning anxiety does surface. Not that I'm trying to be mean, but you need to know what you feel fearful about. Confidence is a byproduct of predictability. And when we haven't done something, when it's not predictable, it's just feels like butterflies in our stomach and tightness in our throat. That's a confidence issue. So, in order to give you some confidence, some predictability, I've offered a model to you. FYI, for your improvement. This book represents a significant career of some leadership experts, some leadership scholars, Lominger in particular, around the concretizing of leadership from a behavior point of view, in the ways that people see it, the way it works out in families and workplaces and communities, civic process. You've heard of the USO before. In this case, it's the UOS. There are these areas in which we find ourselves highly underperforming. If you take let me start over my thought. Around these issues of competency, we've got to have a way to make sense of the mental model. I would suggest that you go to the back part of this book. Don't try to read this encyclopedia from front to back or A to Z around the competencies, but to go to the back part of the book, and the book will show you how to use the book. I've given you a book that requires you to learn how to use the book as a methodology. But the appendix, sections A, B, and C, give you plenty of examples, instructions on how to use this book developmentally. A couple of things I want to cue you to are some of the sample developmental plans. So the USO I just mentioned. The U part is that area in which you are unskilled, a competency in which you have no technical capacity in. You don't know what comes next. You don't have any confidence or competence in. You're unskilled in it, yet it may be necessary for where you're going in life. particularly when we think about our movements from supervisor to systems leader to strategic enterprise level leaders, and how that can test the competencies that we thought that we had down pat, but undergo a stress test of competency as we move on. Some folks have called it the Peter Principle, that we tend to get promoted 1 degree beyond our level of competence, and then we kind of get batted back down to our actual competence. So this is the whole area of the unskilled. That's the U. The O is the overused area. So some of you were very charming when you were kids because you liked to talk a lot and you were precocious, and people loved to hear you quote long passages of poetry or to play Mozart and those sorts of things. And now that you are 5 decades into this, you're still trying to use charm every time you have a customer service experience to see if you can get a better deal for yourself, or if someone doesn't like how you've delivered service, maybe you can charm them through their critique and their complaint. That would be an overused competency. I hope you get the picture there. So the U is the unskilled, the O is the overused, and then there are those career stoppers and the stallers. That's the S in my mixed up USO. Those areas that if we do not attend to these things in light of the demands of the performance situations we find ourselves in, from self, team, community, family, then we will find ourselves moving towards derailment, wrestling with shadow side issues, starting to get report cards that are surprising as the grades drop, areas of unmanageability developing or making their habitation with us. So I want you to get familiar with this book. I want you to use it experimentally. If I were starting this relationship, a mentoring relationship, I'd go to someone who has this area of competency already developed. Let me pick one to make it concrete for you. I'm just going to the table of contents. Let's say the competency is conflict management. So if you know there's someone who is really good at transforming conflict, and you like the style in which they do it, and the way they're direct, and the way they manage, they are fair and minded, those sorts of things, then I would make an appointment with that person, a mentored appointment with this person, to say, hey, I'm not really good at this. My conflicts always go poorly. I wind up reacting and getting overheated, and I burst out in tears or yelling, and it just goes poorly for everybody involved. But you seem to have a lot of poise and control, and your friends people are still friends when a conflict has been transformed. Can I learn from you? So you would meet around that one, and you would say, this is what I've been overusing. I've been avoiding, and I've been accommodating. I've been overusing that part of conflict. What I need to do is move a little bit more courage in the win-lose area as well as the collaborate area. Can you help me learn that? So the mentor experience over the 3 meetings would be around you learning your way through that using that section of the book. Now the mentee or the protege, that person, you would initiate the conversation and say, hey, Sally, I've noticed that you've got some real promise as a team leader. I wonder if you see yourself as someone's going to be around here a while, because I think we'd like to prepare you for being a manager. So you meet with Sally, you give her a copy of the book or give her access to the table of contents, and you say, are there areas here that you would benefit from a few conversations developmentally if you are going to be moving towards a management role, moving out of the team leader to management role? So letting Sally pick the areas, you would build 3 meetings around those things and try to be resourceful, useful, give her some of the insight of the organization, insight around how those competencies would be used, and help develop the confidence. Confidence is a byproduct of predictability. And just by simply adding this kind of content, giving folks a plan, things have already become more predictable, just by virtue that they're transferable and replicatable, and others realize, hey, this is credible. Other people are learning this. Now, I have a suggestion for you. If you're still struggling on what to do with this book and how to learn, don't tell anybody I said this, but go to your local Starbucks. I mean, not Starbucks, to your local Apple store, the closest Genius Bar you can get to. Apple has used this process for the last, I think, about 5 years or so to train all of its Genius Bar folks, its employees. Everyone has a developmental plan according to what Apple Genius was telling me and was making me aware how they use this book inside of their corporate training. So go get with the Genius. Surely there's something shiny in the Apple store you're interested in, and ask them if they know anything about this book. Carry it with you and watch them get distracted and maybe call a couple of folks over to tell you stories. Well, that gets us started in the step that makes leadership development social in nature and brings out in you your developmental capacities. And I'd like to be a friend to you in that area of leadership development and mentoring ethic. So I look forward to the conversations we have in the classroom.